The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the David Pakman Show. I am, of course, not David Pakman. I am Benjamin Dixon, host of the Benjamin Dixon Show, and host of the upcoming show To The Point that will be hosted by or distributed by Revere Press. Excited to be here with you. David is out of town. He's on his way to Las Vegas for a conference, and he will be broadcasting from Las Vegas for the remainder of the week. Let's jump right into the news. Just one day after Donald Trump called for the resignation of his Secretary of Department of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen, it is being reported that he has asked the Secret Service Chief, Randolph Ales, to step down as well. Now, the Secret Service is a part of the Homeland Security, and they are the administration is saying that this is a part of a broader shakeup to move in a different direction with regard to Homeland Security. But there's a lot of things happening underneath this firing, or at least this resignation of the Secret Service chief. The White House has confirmed that Ales is leaving, However, according to CBS and the BBC, the White House won't confirm whether or not Trump is asking him to step down or whether or not it was an outright firing. Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders has announced that James Murray will be taking over in the position. And so there's a lot happening here. Notwithstanding the fact that Donald Trump has fired or has had resigned so many positions, and that we are operating with a skeleton government, that we have people in positions who are clearly not qualified for it. That's the backdrop of this story, right? That Donald Trump is filling positions with acting secretaries so that he can circumvent the Senate approval process. All of that is in the backdrop. But there's another thing that's happening in the backdrop that makes this particular story extremely concerning, as well as something that requires more investigation. Chuck Schumer, the Senate Democratic leader, has called for the outgoing chief to testify before Congress, specifically surrounding a security breach that we found out about yesterday, on Monday. Now, yesterday it was reported that a Chinese national by the name of Yung Zhang was arrested after getting access to Mar-a-Lago under false pretenses. And as they investigated her and they searched her room, they found, I believe it was 9 USB flash drives, thumb drives, 5 SIM cards, multiple debit cards, and about $8,000 in cash. And they also found on this Chinese national, a radio frequency device that helped detect hidden cameras. Now, all of that being said, it feels as though the timing of this is a little too close to not take it in consideration in terms of the firing. Of course, the Trump administration is saying that them firing or having the Secret Service chief step down is not tied to this whatsoever. And even Ales, at least a report is coming out that he was asked to resign 10 days ago before this news broke or before this incident happened. Regardless, there's so many things that happen at Mar-a-Lago that involve the Secret Service, so many different security breaches and so many unethical things that take place at Mar-a-Lago. Just the pay to play, right? The ability for people to pay $200,000 to get access to not just Donald Trump, but to the White House, the administration, national security issues, to be in the environment where these types of things these decisions are being made, because the president spends an obscene amount of time at his resort. So there's so many things that are going on. So even if we can't tie this firing directly to the apprehension of this Chinese national, who, by the way, they're still investigating. It's nothing concrete. We don't know the true intentions of whether or not this was some type of espionage. We don't know. That remains to be seen. But for these two things to basically happen on the same day, the day we find out about the Chinese national is the same day that Trump asked, or at least that it is announced, that the Secret Service chief steps down. it sets off red flags. And Chuck Schumer subsequently said that requested that the outgoing Secret Service chief come and testify before the Senate so that they can ascertain and investigate what was going on. Now, this, again, the second backdrop that you have to take in consideration is Donald Trump really not having an administration that's led by people who are confirmed by Congress, having a significant amount of resignations almost since the very first day, having fired quite a few people. I mean, we really are working with an administration that is filled with incompetent people. And this is not hyperbole. This is not just a way of slamming Donald Trump, but quite literally people who are unqualified for the job, number one. And then Donald Trump assigning and appointing people by circumventing the Senate approval process. And then furthermore, he's assigning people and appointing people who are specifically and uniquely qualified at undermining the institutions for which they are required to cover and to lead. So this just shows you the type of chaos that Donald Trump likes to operate in. It may have something to do with loyalty. Sure, I'm sure there's a lot of theories out there that Donald Trump will fire anyone who does not express a direct oath of loyalty to him. But I also think that this is just a type of environment that Donald Trump likes to operate in. There are some leaders who would rather run with nothing than to have people around them that remotely challenge them. And this, again, this isn't to make it seem as though any of these people who are working for Donald Trump are noble people. But as David covered yesterday, the firing of Kirstjen Nielsen, she did just about everything she could possibly do for Donald Trump. And once it came to a point where she said, OK, well, we have to obey the law. This is not to defend her by any measure. But Donald Trump betrayed her because she would not put herself in even further damage, in further peril by breaking the law on behalf of Donald Trump. So that loyalty oath that Donald Trump requires, I think, is a reasonable way of understanding why he has no one around him. But I also think that another way of understanding why we have such a fragmented administration is simply because Donald Trump loves to operate in chaos. And there are a lot of leaders who operate in chaos because in chaos, they can get away with everything they want to get away with. And speaking of getting away with whatever you can get away with, Representative Nadler has requested, in conjunction with Representative Doug Collins, I believe, of Georgia, they have requested that Special Counsel Mueller appear before the House Judiciary Committee. In a tweet, Nadler said this. He said, quote, "Today, Ranking Member Collins called for Special Counsel Mueller to appear before the House Judiciary. I fully agree. Special Counsel Mueller should come before the committee to answer questions in public about his 22-month investigation into President Trump and his associates." He said in the next tweet, he said, "In order to ask Special Counsel Mueller the right questions, the committee must receive the special counsel's full report and hear from Attorney General Barr about the report on May 2nd. We look forward to hearing from Mr. Mueller at the appropriate time." Now, a lot has been the Mueller report. And actually, we shouldn't even call it that. At this point, we're just going to call it the Barr summary. The Barr summary of the Mueller report has been a fascinating expedition of the media really falling over themselves for the news cycle. And let me unpack that real quick, because no one has seen, and I'm sure David has covered this ad nauseum, right? No one has seen the full report. And while I don't personally expect the full report to defer or depart from the Barr summary significantly, there's clearly damning information in the report that this administration does not want to get out. Otherwise, if the report exonerated him fully, like he said, it would have been published in full for everyone to read item by item by item. That's number one. But number two, the reason I mentioned the media is because it's fascinating how they ran with this narrative that Trump has been exonerated. And they did so in this enclosed news cycle of about 48 hours for the mainstream media. And then some of the other people, some of my friends, Michael Tracy, Glenn Greenwald, they're still slam dunking this thing, even though they haven't read the reports themselves. So it's just amazing how everyone has been running to the hills with this story of Trump being exonerated, but literally no one in Congress and no one in the media has seen the full report. And for me, it just seems like if we're going to be objective, if we're going to at least try to pretend as though we are objective journalists, then goodness, you got to read the damn report. That being said, I find it fascinating, and I actually think it's sort of a good thing that there's a bipartisan call for Mueller to testify before Congress. Naylor is a Democrat, I believe, from New York, and Collins is a Republican from the state of Georgia. Both of them are calling for Mueller to testify. The question is what will he be able to say? What constraints are going to be placed on him? What could he and also what Naylor pointed out is there's no way they can ask the appropriate questions without getting access to the full report. So it's very important that they get access to the full report. And again, the more I say that, the more ridiculous I think all of our media outlets are. CNN, MSNBC, all the mainstream media outlets, Fox News, of course, we expect Fox News to do what it does. But for people, for people who for months have called for objectivity, not MSNBC, you notice I didn't list them, but for other organizations, other media organizations to call for objectivity, to all of a sudden make this an open and shut case, shut it down, close, no more questions, and he's been exonerated, and we've moved on. We've moved on from it because that's the nature of our news cycle. It really screams to me that they weren't looking so much for objectivity as much as they were looking for a slam dunk news cycle for clicks. And whether that meant allowing Donald Trump to tell America that he has been completely exonerated without anyone objective or anyone not a part of the administration seeing the actual report, if that meant that's what they had to do to get a good news cycle, then that's exactly what they did. It really is fascinating to me that I'm not surprised, but I'm always reminded that the very people who are calling for objectivity very quickly side on the side of power when it benefits them financially and when it benefits their news cycle and they can get the ratings that they want. Well, they'll just throw everything else to the wind when literally no one, not a single journalist, not a single reporter, not a single commentator, not a news agency, hell, not even the Senate nor the Congress has seen the report. And yet they all have concluded that they know so well what's in that report that they can say that the president has been fully exonerated. Well, we'll see about that when it comes time for Special Counsel Mueller to testify. And that's only if Congress people are able to be prepared for that testimony to ask the right questions by being able to read the report before Mueller testifies.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. I am Benjamin Dixon, host of the Benjamin Dixon Show and host of the upcoming show To The Point, which will be hosted by Revere Press, reverepress.com. Definitely want to check that out. David is away as he is traveling to Las Vegas for a conference, but he will be hosting for the remainder of the week, broadcasting from Las Vegas. Let's get back into the news. Now, yesterday, David covered the firing of Kirstjen Nielsen, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Now, underneath the firing, as David discussed, is the fact that President Trump is infuriated with the uptick in the number of border crossings that happened in February, which is the highest number since 2011. Now, of course, underneath that data is quite a bit of revealing information about what's actually happening south of our border, but we'll get to that. Because Secretary Nielsen pushed back against Donald Trump's attempt to unlawfully ask border agents to refuse access to migrants, to refuse access to asylum seekers, to turn them away at the border, several things that he was requesting illegally. I guess Kirstjen Nielsen finally got up enough nerve to say, okay, I can be evil but I can't outright break the law. I guess that's the deciding factor, because she, of course, was the individual who put families and children in cages and separated families. She was okay with that. She just didn't want to be caught on the wrong side of the actual law. Never mind implementing unjust laws, but that's an entirely different conversation. Underneath all of that is, of course, the mastermind behind this. We'll pull up an image of him on the screen. Stephen Miller. Now, listen, I'm not one to talk about a person being bald because, as you can see, I don't have hair. But someone really should tell this guy that being this evil at the age of 33 actually wears you down, because he's only 33, as you can see on your screen. But now, ad hominems aside, Stephen Miller has had a singular focus since he has been a part of the Trump administration, and that focus has been to cause cruelty and pain in the lives of immigrants and asylum seekers. That is his number one goal. He is looking to implement the most draconian policies possible at the border, and he has a vessel in Donald Trump who's willing to go along with it, even to the point of illegality, right? Even to the point of breaking the law. I want to read a quote from CNN so that you can just get some context about what's going on. And I saw this quote, first of all, from Nation reporter Adam Serwer. And I mentioned him because he coined a phrase that I think is so relevant here. He said that the cruelty is the point. The cruelty is the point. And I think that is, once you put everything that Donald Trump does in context of the cruelty being the point, then you understand the score. Right? You understand what's actually going on. You understand that you can't really negotiate with people when the cruelty is the point. You have to get rid of them. You have to get them out of office. But this is what Adam shared via CNN. He said, quote, or CNN said, quote, according to multiple sources, the president wanted families separated even if they came in at a legal port of entry and were legal asylum seekers. The president wanted families separated even if they were apprehended within the United States. He thinks the separations work to deter migrants from coming. Sources told CNN that Nielsen tried to explain they could not bring the policy back because of court challenges, and the White House staffers tried to explain it would be an unmitigated PR disaster. He just wants to separate families, a senior administration official said. I mean, the cruelty is the point. And while I think that is a fascinating statement and a great talking point to put this in context, it is absolutely the case. Donald Trump, vis-a-vis Stephen Miller's obsessed fixation with anyone, with the browning of America. Let's just call it what it is, right? Stephen Miller, Ilhan Omar got in trouble again yesterday for calling Stephen Miller a white nationalist. Well, hell, his own family members refer to him as being a Nazi, right? So, you know, Stephen Miller has this obsession with white genocide and the browning of America and too many immigrants coming in and white America becoming a minority country in this country rather. And so when you think about it in context of what drives him, you really understand. And then actually, let me take one quick aside. Not only what drives Stephen Miller, but what clearly drives the president of the United States. He's not only okay with the cruelty, he's okay with the cruelty even if that cruelty breaks the law. And so Stephen Miller has found the perfect vessel through which he can carry out his ideology of white nationalism and white supremacy. Now, Adam Schiff said this on Twitter with regard to Nielsen and the firing, and I think it's very important to place all of this in context. He said, quote, Secretary Nielsen's policies were cruel and unconscionable. A generation from now, we will still recoil at how America separated families, children from their parents, and put them in cages. But make no mistake, a change in personnel is pointless. The problem comes from the very top. And that's because at the very top of our nation, we have the white supremacist in chief, Donald Trump. People always ask, well, why do you make this about race? Because clearly this is about stopping. Can we go one step further? I'm sorry, it's been a while. I've been working and building companies and stuff, and I haven't had a chance to really talk politics as much as I like to. But if we go one step further, this is not just Donald Trump, people. This is the Republican Party. They just don't like the fact that Donald Trump doesn't know how to disguise his intentions. I believe I played it here several times because I've been on David's show so many times. I know I played it on my show at least 20 dozen times. But there's a clip from 2008 of John McCain, who was getting ready to run for president, and Bill O'Reilly, as they discussed the border. And the framework in which they discussed what's happening at the border was literally the fact that America is run by white Christian men. And then they went on to say that what the left and what we radicals want is we want literally their words, the browning of America. Why do I bring that up? I bring that up every single time I get an opportunity to, because you have to understand that this is Republican orthodoxy. This is literally conservatism. This is what they all want. They just don't want it done in a way that can be embarrassing to them, and in a way that it makes it so easily clear. It makes it so clear, rather, to everyone of their racist intentions. They literally fear the browning of America. And so while Adam Schiff is correct, it's not about Secretary Nielsen, even though she did unconscionable things, right? It's not just about Stephen Miller, even though this is like his fantasy. Like this is what he gets off on. Like he is in hog heaven. He doesn't care if everything else falls around him. As long as he can express his cruelty at the border, he is a happy man. It's not just about him. It's also about Donald Trump, but it doesn't stop at Donald Trump, even though he's our current white supremacist in chief. It has to be laid at the feet of all of conservatism. A handful of Democrats, historically, you can see the videos, some of the same language, but we'll get back to them. It has to be laid at the feet of the Republican Party en masse, because this is what they have been championing for the longest time, for many, many years. The only problem now is that they have a buffoon in the office in the White House who doesn't have the ability to cover up his white nationalism and his white supremacy, because he is an oafish buffoon. And everyone can see clearly for who he is, see him clearly for who he is. So, yeah, it's not just what's happening. It's not just what's going on with Nielsen, Miller, and Trump. This is America. This is a large part of America. And once we realize that, place it in context of what my friend Adam Serwer says. The cruelty is the point. You juxtapose those two facts, that half of America wants this and the cruelty is the point. Well, you see the kind of condition that we're really in, and you see the amount of progress that we as Americans have not actually made yet. The last segment, we talked quickly about Kirstjen Nielsen being fired, Stephen Miller's cruelty being the point. That's what he dreams about, being cruel at the border, and Donald Trump. But we briefly mentioned the illegal actions that the president was asking border agents to carry out. We briefly alluded to it, but I want you to take a look at this video of acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney as he makes it clear that the president is going to break the law in another way.
They knew they're not going to get these taxes. They know what the law is. They know that one of the fundamental principles of the IRS is to protect the confidentiality of you and me and everybody else who files taxes. They know that. They know the terms under law by which the IRS can give them the documents. But political hit job is not one of those reasons. So they know they're not going to get it.
To be clear, you believe Democrats will never see the president's tax returns?
Oh, no, never. No, nor should they.
Okay, so Mick Mulvaney has made it clear that the president, despite Congress asking for the president's tax returns in a very formal and illegal fashion, that the president will never turn over his tax returns. Now, you can debate about what's going to turn up. Is there anything in there that's substantive? Are the Democrats just playing political games? You all can debate that as much as you want. What's important here is for us to realize that we have a president of the United States who is willing to look at the law and simply say, I'm going to ignore it. The request that was made, it was made last week by the House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Richard Neal. He formally requested it he was citing an old IRS code, but it's legal nonetheless, which gives the chairman of the House and Ways and Means Committee the ability to request the IRS turn over tax returns for basically anybody. Now, you can argue whether or not you think that code is legal or whether it's appropriate or whether it should be overturned, but rather it is legal. And so he's using the law to make a formal request of the IRS, and the IRS actually has until tomorrow, the 10th, to respond. Now, this doesn't mean that Trump can't challenge this. Trump can challenge this in court. Trump does have the ability to push back against this. But for Mick Mulvaney to go out and simply say, they're never going to get it, despite the fact that there is an IRS code that allows a House Ways and Means Committee chairman to request this tax return, shows you just how unlawful this administration really is. And quite frankly, how happily they are about being able to just do whatever they want to do, and the belief that they are above the law. This is very clear. And former Attorney General Holder, sees it much the same way. He said on yesterday via Twitter, he said, quote, "Really? Two questions in reference to Mick Mulvaney." He said, "What is he hiding? And on exactly what basis is the Trump administration going to lawfully not disclose the tax returns in response to a legitimate congressional request? This is a direct affront to the rule of law." Serious. Precisely the case, right? When you couple this with the illegal, when you couple the fact that Trump is going to ignore the request of Congress, right? Mick Mulvaney, the chief of staff, right, saying that they're never going to get his tax returns. When you couple that with the fact that Donald Trump just last week was asking agents at the border to directly break the law, then you understand that we have a president who is lawless, who believes he's above the law, and believes that all of this infrastructure, all of this bureaucracy, everyone who works for the federal government works for him and not for the laws of the land. And that is the perfect combination to see not only atrocities, but to see the overturning, to see the undermining of our nation in a way that we haven't seen in a long time, in a way that we've never seen. Of course, the Civil War comes to mind. However, this is coming directly from the president of the United States. And while a lot of this can be dismissed as, people would want to dismiss this as hyperbole, it's the little things, man. It really is the little things that if Donald Trump was able to get these border agents to break the law in this manner, right? If he's able to look at Congress and say, I'm simply going to ignore you, those things, first of all, they're not little, but even if you disregard them as being, insignificant, then you cannot deny the fact that they add up to the possibility of us undermining our government in a way that we've never seen, right? When you have armed forces, so to speak, who are willing to ignore the law of the land and simply do what the president says, that is a recipe for disaster. Now, I want to read a quote. Here's a couple of quotes from CNN so that you can get the full breadth and depth of what the president was asking at the border. And then I want you to compound that. I want you to sit that side by side, juxtapose that to what the president is saying through Mick Mulvaney in terms of, I'm just going to ignore the Congress. The president told agents via CNN not to let migrants in. Quote, last Friday, the president visited California, where he said, "We're full. Our system's full. Our country's full. You can't come in. Our country is full. Why? What can you do? We can't handle any more. Our country is full. Can't come in. I'm sorry. It's very simple." Behind the scenes, two sources told CNN the president told border agents not to let migrants in. "Tell them we don't have the capacity," he said. "If judges give you trouble, say, 'Sorry, judge, I can't do it. We don't have the room.'" After the president left the room, agents sought further advice from their leaders, who told them that they were not giving them the direction, and if they did what the president said, they would take on personal liability. You have to follow the law, they were told. This, Fascinating. I mean, look at the mindset of the president of the United States. He literally told them to go to a judge. If you get in trouble, I want you to break the law. And if you get in trouble with the judge, tell the judge I said that we're full and we can't come in. It's mind-boggling that this is okay to a certain percentage of the electorate. It doesn't blow me away anymore that this is who Donald Trump is. It does not blow me away that this is where we've gotten to in this country. What blows me away is how we got here, and the fact that the people who supported Donald Trump can look at this and say that it's okay. You know why they can look at this and say that this is okay? Because they're loyal to Donald Trump and not the United States of America. This is as good a place as any. There's a clip of a documentary of Steve Bannon. And Steve Bannon is at a rally, and there's a lady who stands up in the crowd, and she says, she precisely says that she never thought she would want a dictator, but if America did have a dictator, she would want it to be Trump. Listen in.
Can you hand the mic to the woman in the back here?
I just want to say this.
Yes, ma'am.
Never in my life did I. I would just like to.
I tell you what. We need one more question. Can you hand the mic to the woman in the back here?
I just want to say this.
Yes, ma'am.
Never in my life did I think I would like to see a dictator, but if there's going to be one, I want it to be Trump.
It's unbelievable. And it shows you the power of the cult of personality. It does. It shows you how tenuous American democracy is in general, right? How democracy can lean towards a strong man. It can lean towards dictators. It leans toward hyperpartisanship, which pushes people into corners so far and so wide that they will swear allegiance, even to the point of undermining the nation, right? They will swear allegiance to a dictator. They will swear allegiance to their political figure. It just shows you how tenuous and how how much democracy can hang on by a thread, especially when you have a segment of the population who can be so easily driven into this fury that they're willing to turn over all legality, their rights in the Constitution over to a person like Donald Trump or over to anybody, period. It's absolutely asinine. I'm trying to explain it and explain it without being so bombastic about it. But this is madness. And you have a segment of our population who still today can look at the president telling Border Patrol agents to break the law, who could look at Congress and say, I don't care what you say, I'm going to do what I want to do. And then not only are they not offended by this, but they sit back and say, yeah, that's our dude. That's our guy. That's exactly the kind of leader we want. In fact, if we're going to have a dictator, we will want it to be Donald Trump. Yeah, man, listen, I'm going to participate in the Democratic primaries, but whoever wins the primaries, we better get out there and vote all of these people out of power. Because if we keep empowering people like Donald Trump, you see the madness that is driving his supporters, and they don't care how far he goes. There is no limit. We used to think that he could get it. Well, actually, I'm sorry. It is actually true what they said. He can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue in New York City, and his supporters, that 30-some-odd%, a huge percentage of the voting electorate, still will support him.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. I am, of course, not David Pakman. I'm Benjamin Dixon, host of the podcast, The Benjamin Dixon Show, and host of the upcoming video show, To The Point, which will be hosted on and distributed by Revere Press. Be sure to check that out. David is away traveling. He will be in Las Vegas for the remainder of the week at a conference, and he will be broadcasting from Las Vegas for the remainder of the week. So be sure to be back here tomorrow for more David. I would ask that you would indulge me on this next videos. Not normally something that I would cover and not cover in this way, but I want you to take a look at this interaction between Meghan McCain and Joy Behar. And I want you to we'll discuss it in two different ways, right? I think there's something really substantive underneath it that we should discuss that says a lot about America, right? So there is something valid that I'm going to discuss. But before I discuss that, I want you to just take a look at Joy Behar's reaction to Meghan McCain, and we'll discuss it when we come back. Let's take a look.
It's the way to solve the problem. Keep them there happy or whatever. Solvent, give them a house, give them food, help their children.
Give a Nicaraguan
stop the
house.
crime rates.
Well, we've had a bunch of liberal guests who do not want to send in aid
I
at all.
listen to you. Let me just finish.
Yeah, part of your job is to listen to me.
Okay, so here's the deal. Here's what's not going to happen today. We're not going to do this.
Okay, listen, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where Joy Behar just was. Again, I'm going to get to the substantive thing in a minute, but just look at the reaction on her face. I know what Joy is thinking here because I've thought it on many days. Do I have enough savings in my account to lose this job? Because the way I'm feeling right now, just my natural inclination when somebody tries you like this. See, this is how people get in confrontations. Good people can be taken to really bad places when they're dealing with people as petulant as Meghan McCain. And I know we're supposed to be above that. We're supposed to be above the fray, and we're supposed to be able to control all those good things. I hear you. But if you've been on a job and you've run into people like this, you know this look from Joy Behar. She's not only calculating, does she have enough money? Does she actually need this job? She's calculating how long her benefits will last, and can she last until she get another job? She's also calculating, like, what kind of charge will I get if I mollywopped Meghan McCain right here on national television? What charge would I get? Would I get simple assault or a misdemeanor, or will I get a felony? This is what happens when you're confronted with the level of arrogance and the level of just disgustingness that Meghan McCain just demonstrated. Now, thank you for indulging me. Let me set that aside. There's something to be said about Meghan McCain and other prominent figures being on these. And really, that's the thing right there. Why are they prominent figures? That's really it in a nutshell. Like, what the hell is Meghan McCain doing? What qualifications does she really have, right, to be on this show? And I know you've thought about this before, so there's like one of two answers. Number one, her dad, right? Which there's a fabulous clip that if we have enough time, I'll play it, that shows you her full resume. Right. It's a minute long of her saying nothing but my dad, my father, my father, my father. It's her father for sure. Right. Former Senator or deceased Senator John McCain. But then the other argument is going to be, well, she's there for ratings because they know that we're going to respond to this type of thing. Here's the thing about that. Regardless of which argument you think is the reason she's on television, it speaks volumes about the nature of what America really is and what America isn't. We claim that America is a meritocracy where if you work really hard and you go to the best schools and you do this and you do that and you intern and you work your way up, the American dream is yours. But in reality, it's quite the opposite. It's really filled. America is riddled with spoiled trust fund babies who are handed everything in life, have zero qualifications to be on the platforms that they have, right? They simply were born into money. And so they are propped up in front of the rest of America. And we're supposed to sit back and accept them and say, yeah, Meghan McCain worked really hard to get everything that she has. She worked really hard being born to John McCain. I mean, that was her life's work started before she was born, because she worked hard as hell in heaven, I guess, trying to make sure that she would be born to John McCain, because she's been born to John McCain for the rest of her life, she is able to go anywhere and do anything that she wants, even though she's simply unqualified to be anywhere on national television for any reason. The other young woman who's on that show, Abby Huntsman, is pretty much the same, but at least Abby has had like a couple of runs at a couple. I think she was on Fox News. She had some experience. But even then, that experience, why was she there? There's so many people in places that have absolutely no skill set to be there, and they are simply there by virtue of their money or by virtue of who their parents were. I mean, we saw that. We saw that with the most recent case of college students, parents buying their way into colleges right, for their children by spending an obscene amount of money. But that just blows away this idea that America is a meritocracy. The hardest working people in America very seldom get anywhere, right? The hardest people who are up at 5 a.m. at a bus stop, riding across town so that they can go work 12-hour shifts, 15-hour shifts for minimum wage. Right, doing way more than what any of these trust fund babies would ever have to do. They don't know, they don't understand the meaning of hard work. So, yeah, surely she's on this show to get ratings because she's going to do some of this spoiled, petulant stuff that she does. I agree. Yes, she's on this show because her father's John McCain. I also agree. But she's honestly on this show because America has an obsession with the rich and the famous, never mind qualifications whatsoever. So as you go through your day and you're working extra hard, not to irritate you or not to try to push you towards a more revolutionary stance, but just remember that there's an entire class of people who have been handed everything that they ever need, and yet they're looking at you and telling you that you're not working hard enough. A new report says that 1 in 5 millionaire CEOs may actually be psychopaths. This is a report coming from, or an article coming from CNBC. And listen, at face value, I think it's really self-explanatory. Not a real need for me to go in depth when you consider millionaires in America. But I want to read directly from the article. They say, quote, millionaires often crave validation and recognition from others. This is primarily because of their self-esteem is high but fragile. Bosses who constantly show off are probably desperate for others' admiration. Number 2, they tend to be self-centered. This means they generally are less interested in others and have deficits in empathy. For this reason, they are rarely found displaying any genuine consideration for people other than themselves. And number 3, they have high levels of entitlement. Narcissists commonly behave as if they deserve certain privileges or enjoy higher status than their peers enjoy. So those are 3 traits that are inside of the article that explains why 1 in 5 millionaire CEOs may be psychopaths. The flip side of this is that this article also tries to explain that this is not necessarily a horrible thing. It's just sort of the way it goes, especially when you think about super successful individuals. They use the example of Steve Jobs. While he was able to do all these magnificent things, he was very harmful to his or treated his employees very terribly. Parking, they use the example of him parking in the handicap spot, which and the treatment of his subordinates, giving those examples. And then of course they brought up Elon Musk, who we can all see probably fits this mode very well. They also brought up examples of just regular people who may not be millionaires or CEOs, but they have a dichotomy. On one side, they use an example of a firefighter who did some amazing rescuing of individuals when he was off work, and then turn around, he got busted in a $100 million cocaine ring. So it just, they're trying to explain it away as saying, well, the fact that they may be psychopaths is may be troubling, but also this is sort of the nature of high performing individuals. I don't know so much about that explanation. I think the explanation is BS. But what I do know is that I'm not surprised, or actually rather, I'm surprised the percentage isn't higher, right? Working with, I honestly don't have to explain this any further. Every single one of you who has worked with the CEO of your company, right? You see traits that actually are rewarded in America. There it is. That's what we'll talk about. They're rewarded. The behavior patterns that are rewarded in America are behavior patterns that lean towards narcissism and lean towards megalomania, right? And lean towards the lack of empathy. In fact, the more empathy that you have in certain corporate settings, the less likely you are to move up, because you have to be willing to play at a cutthroat level just to get ahead, right? That's simply the fact of life in quite a few corporate structures. Not every corporation organization is like that. I've been in some environments that are quite the opposite, but I've also been in environments in which this behavior that they're describing is malignant. Like, this is literally describing people that I've worked with who, whether or not they're millionaires remains to be seen. But I mean, the level of narcissism, the level of entitlement, and the ability to mobilize that and present oneself, or actually not mobilize that, the ability to capitalize on that megalomania and convince the rest of the world that we're really just good people out here trying to do good. Right? Public relations, like PR, publicists, man, they are the master propagandists, because they're able to take a person who quite literally needs medical attention, right? Who treats people as subhuman, who will step on anyone to get where they need to go, and they will make them look as though they are the most noble people in our society. That's what they do. And it's not just their fault. It's also America's fault in general, because we reward this type of behavior time and time again. No one's really going to get rewarded for being the kindest person in corporate America or being the most empathetic. No, the person who gets rewarded, who gets a promotion, who gets to be the CEO, is the person who's literally willing to step on whoever the hell they have to step on to get where they want to go. So I'm not surprised by this report, except for the fact that I would think it would be more than 20% of millionaires. I don't know. I'm thinking the majority of millionaires, CEOs in this environment, in this capitalistic environment, have crushed quite a few people to get their way to the top. They just look sanitized because of good public relations.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. Happening now, or at least at the time of this recording, Attorney General William Barr is testifying before Congress, and we obtained a clip of Barr refusing to answer the question of whether or not the White House itself actually saw the Mueller report. Now, you can recall, everyone knows the Mueller report was a 22-month process, an investigation. And instead of releasing the report, William Barr released a 4-page summary. And Donald Trump said that this summary exonerated him completely, or rather, he said that the report exonerated him completely. But Representative Nita Lowey asked William Barr just a moment ago, did the White House see the report before you released your summarizing letter? Has the White House seen it since? Have they been briefed on the contents beyond what was your summarizing letter? And Barr refused to answer. Let's take a quick look at this clip.
Did the White House see the report before you released your summarizing letter? Has the White House seen it since then? Have they been briefed on the contents beyond what was in your summarizing letter to the Judiciary Committee?
I've said what I'm going to say about the report today. I've issued 3 letters about it, and I was willing to discuss the historic information of how the report came to me in my decision on Sunday. But I've already laid out the process that is going forward to release these reports, hopefully within a week. And I'm not going to say anything more about it until the report is out and everyone has a chance to look at it.
So Attorney General Barr is making it clear that this is a question that he cannot answer. I don't, we can parse it however you want to parse it, but he refuses to answer this. And this is important because this cuts to what we discussed in a previous segment, where Donald Trump set the narrative by saying he's been fully exonerated. Media outlets picked up this narrative, spread it around as though it was absolutely the matter of fact. Also as though they've read the summary, or rather read the Mueller report themselves. Well, now it turns out, it sounds like the president of the United States himself has not read the report, or anyone in the White House. The question was a general question. Did the White House see the report? Not just did Donald Trump see the report, but did the White House see the report? And Barr was not willing to answer. Something else that we can glean from this brief exchange is the fact that it looks as though they are gearing up to release the report because of all the pressure that's being mounted against them. The attempt to keep this as private as they possibly could. It looks as though they're going to have to release the report. The question is how much of the report will be redacted, right? How much is the White House going to redact it? So at some point, whether or not Trump has seen it yet, they're going to see it and they're going to be given the opportunity to redact as much information as they would like. Well, if Donald Trump was completely exonerated, then by all means, release the entire report. This is the frustrating part about journalism, about media, about politics in general. We need the media to do their job and to point out these inconsistencies and the glaring hypocrisy of us having to take at face value a summary versus the full report. Right? Who else is going to hold political power accountable if the media is not? And while the media took the last several weeks to slam dunk on MSNBC, probably rightfully so, it still remains to be seen, right? To slam dunk on everyone who believed that there was anything to the Russia probe at all, they should have been pointing out the fact that we have not seen the report to concretely and to definitively say that Donald Trump has been exonerated. What they did instead was take the president's word for it and use that for a news cycle in which they lambasted anyone who believed anything about the Russia probe whatsoever. And now it turns out that it looks as though that the White House itself has not seen the full report or has not read the full report, at least according to the exchange that we just saw between Barr and Congressperson Lowy. This is just another important point in a series of important points that shows you several things, that shows you that the president of the United States absolutely does have something to hide. Whether or not it is impeachable, we see, that is a political question, right? That is a political question. In terms of whether or not it met the legal bar to indict him, we see that it did not meet the legal bar to indict him, according to Robert Mueller. But we also know that there's been indictable offenses, or rather, there's been impeachable offenses that have not met the indictment bar. So, I, for one, if you go back through my catalog of videos, my number one thing always was, hey, let's let this play out. Let's let the Mueller probe play itself out and see what information we get from it. And here we've allowed it to play out. At least I have, without, most of us have done it without jumping on the bandwagon of the hysteria, but at the same time, not dismissing it. There's an entire contingency of so-called objective journalists who have been dismissing it and have taken an active role in dismissing the entire Mueller probe as nothing more than conspiracy. And yet here we have the Attorney General of the United States of America saying, well, first of all, being a barrier to seeing the full report, and now saying that we don't even know if the White House has read the report. Where are the journalists who are going to say, hold up, wait a minute, there's something going on here that we need to get to the bottom of? I don't know. They're too busy slam dunking because, the report did not prove that Donald Trump was an actual Manchurian candidate being controlled by Russia. And because he wasn't an actual Manchurian candidate being controlled by Russia, then there's nothing to see here. Well, there's still some smoke here. And the smoke is the fact that Barr was placed into position to block this report from coming out, and did exactly what he was there to do, which was to muddy the waters enough for a news cycle long enough for us to get to the point where we move on from it. And now the rest of this is just kind of secondary conversations. Over the last few weeks, there have been 3 churches in a single parish of Louisiana. Parish is analogous to counties in other states. 3 African-American historic black churches that have been burned down just in the last few weeks. The churches are all historic, all over 100 years old. And we'll put a couple of pictures on the screen. As you can see, the churches were burned to the ground. Now, there was a fourth church that was in another parish, a Louisiana parish. It was about 200 miles away. And that particular church, they don't know if that one is connected to these three, but the three that have been connected in the same county, they have all, or the three that have burned down in the same parish, they are believed to be connected and a possible hate crime. It's something that two things that are happening at the same time in my mind, which is why I'm hesitating, are it's two things that there seems to be a trend of historically of attacking the black community, of racism and hate crimes happening in the black community, targeting African-American churches because of just the historic nature of the role that black churches have played. Black churches generally have been historically, it may not be the case now, but particularly during the civil rights movement, they were the cornerstone of the civil rights movement. They were the hotbed of radicalism in the black community. If there was a fight to be had, you often can find some of the biggest fighters coming from the church. Obviously, the first one that comes to mind for most everyone is Dr. King. And so it has always seemed historically the bombing that killed 4 little black girls during the civil rights movement, the bombing of a church. Even recently, we saw Mother Emanuel AME being targeted by Dylan Roof, killing 9 parishioners of that church. It just, the reason this sets off so many alarms is because historically, white supremacists and white nationalists have targeted the black church. And so with 4 churches burning down in Louisiana, 3 of them burning down in a single parish, it's believed that this is a hate crime. That's first, but you also have to look at the other side of this, the general uptick in white supremacist right-wing violence in this country. We've seen an uptick since the election of Donald Trump. There's just no question. There's tangible data, evidence to show that the rise of white nationalism and white supremacist violence in this country coincided with, or the resurgence, not the rise. Let me correct myself. The resurgence in white supremacist violence in this country coincided with the election of Donald Trump. And it should be no surprise. We see that conservatism in this country has time and again been the excuse and the intellectual veneer that's placed on top of hate, that's placed on top of white supremacy, that's placed on top of policies that we see that are trying to be implemented at the border even now. And so there's a direct line connecting all of these things. The type of hate that we're seeing, the type of violence that we're seeing in this Louisiana parish, burning down of historic black churches, the burning down of historic black churches, being connected and tied to actions of this administration that absolutely, the language, you cannot sever the language of Donald Trump from the uptick in right-wing white nationalist violence in this country.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.